Life Unrehearsed, brought to you by Lianas Senior Transition Support, specialists in downsizing and seniors residences.
And good afternoon. Welcome to Life Unrehearsed. My name is Matt Delvecchio, specializing in life transitions, downsizing in the senior living industry.
And I'm Corrie, a clinical social worker and psychotherapist specializing in grief and loss.
Coming right up on the first half of today's show, we're going to hear the harrowing story of how one woman underwent a stem cell implant and survived a deadly illness. That's going to be soon. Corrie, can't wait to hear from Susan, who will be on with us. But first, I want to talk about, like many other people, scrambling to try to get a second vaccination. How are you making out?
So I did. I'm in. I'm good. I went right away. As soon as they announced that AstraZeneca was being allowed to have our second walk-in, I went, and it was actually, whereas the first one, I had about a 3-hour wait. This one, I walked right in. Contrarily, my husband right now is in a lineup somewhere waiting, but he walked right in the first time. So you know what? It is what it is. What about you?
Well, I'm 55 this year, so in theory, on Monday it's 55 plus that can go in, and so I'm going to try to venture into Clic Santé tomorrow, because they tend to open it up a little bit earlier. I tried today, and they didn't allow me. They slapped my wrist. No, it's not 55 yet. So anyhow, I'm going to give it a shot on tomorrow or Monday and see if we can get it bumped up by about a month.
True, but I believe a lot of the walk-in clinics are doing very well. So many people I know have been able to get whatever vaccine. Well, Moderna is a whole other story, but because unfortunately they don't have them in stock yet.
Getting a big
Pfizer
big shipment of Moderna coming in this month. But yeah, Corrie, I've heard the same thing. Just try the walk-ins and roll the dice a bit, but go for it. All this to say, encouraging second doses. Father's Day coming up, and I know families want to get together, and we all want to enjoy the summers. What do we have coming up in the second half, Corrie?
So nice. We have a program, Kids Reading to Kids. Wait until you hear about this heartwarming initiative. It's called We Read to You. And we're going to hear about these special children who are doing a very kind and considerate program, and their moms who are going to be sharing this story with us. That's all coming up after the 3:30 news.
Yeah, sure. Be good. These grade 3 wonder kids, and looking forward to hearing from their moms. All right. Several years ago, Susan Doherty was diagnosed with HLH. This is a rare autoimmune disease with a death rate of 70%. It affects 1 in a million adults, and without treatment, the patient dies of multi-organ failure within 60 days of onset. Well, we have Susan Doherty on the line to tell us how she underwent a stem cell implant to survive this deadly illness. Susan, welcome to Life Unrehearsed.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Hi, Matt. Hi, Corrie.
Hello.
Susan, thank you for taking some time here. What a story. Your life was changed forever, I believe, in early 2015. Tell us about when you first received your diagnosis.
Well, I had 5 months of fevers and chills, fevers, and night sweats. And I had gone from doctor to doctor to doctor. I had had every single test. They thought maybe it was leukemia. They thought it was lymphoma, and nobody found anything. And so I just continued to live my own life. I'm a writer. I was publishing my first book. And then all of a sudden, the fevers, instead of being just at night, were around the clock, and then my face went numb. So I phoned the Jewish General Hospital because they had been following me, and they said, get in the car, get to the hospital, come right away. And so I did. I arrived at the Jewish, and I think I had every single test that's ever been invented, PET scans, CAT scans, MRIs, bone marrow biopsies, blood tests, and finally they diagnosed me with hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis, which is an incredible Scrabble word.
Oh, yeah, you say that's a mouthful for sure.
I know. What things of these names?
For us lay people, can you please explain what that is?
So it's immune dysregulation. So basically, the simplest way to explain it is that if you have a cold, your immune system turns on, and your immune cells, they go and they kill off the cold, and then you get better. So with HLH, your immune system turns on, but then it never turns off again. So once it's destroyed the cold bug, then it goes looking for other things to destroy, and you ultimately die of multi-organ failure. Mm-hmm. And as Matt said in a little bit of an intro, HLH to death is like 60 days. So when I arrived at the Jewish, they weren't sure where I was on that trajectory of death. So I was rushed into chemo that very night. And, I had chemo and then 77 days of perfect wellness, and then it all came roaring back. So the only way to survive is to have a stem cell transplant.
I can't imagine with that. Listen to Life Unrehearsed with Matt and Corrie, and that's the voice of Susan Doherty, who had HLH, and you talked about stem cell treatment, Susan. So can you please explain to us, what does a stem cell implant or treatment entail?
Well, first of all, stem cell transplant and bone marrow transplant are synonymous. A lot of people have heard of the bone marrow transplant, and fewer people with the stem cell transplant. So in essence, your long bones, there's a hollow tube in your long bones where your bone marrow is made. And in that marrow are red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, and stem cells. And so your stem cells make all of those other blood components that I just listed. And so when you have a disease like cancer, like leukemia, or in my case, HLH, your own bone marrow is removed with chemotherapy, and you receive new stem cells from a donor. And those stem cells are infused just like chemotherapy, and then they make their way to the bone marrow, and then they begin to generate red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. It's absolutely incredible. And, stem cells are called master cells, and that's because they can differentiate and become any number of cells in the body. Stem cells can become brain cells or lung cells or kidney cells. And so the ongoing research is so fantastic to think of everything in the future that can be done with stem cells.
So, Susan, this is very intriguing. Now we're right into this stem cell, talking about having to get a donor, I imagine. Can you talk to us about that?
Oh, my goodness.
How do you find a match? What happened?
Well, the best match possible is a sibling, and I have 5 siblings. So April Shami at the Jewish, she said, lickety-split, get everybody tested. It's HLA testing. It's a genetic test to see if you're a match. And one of my brothers was a match, but then the genetics department at the MUHC, they blew the whistle and they said, oh my goodness, he needs to be tested to see if he has the PRF1 gene, which is the gene for HLH, and oh my gosh, he had it. So he was canceled, which was a really terrible day to know that my brother was canceled. So we went on the international registry, and there are 25 million people on the registry. And I was really, really lucky. There was a match, and I wasn't told anything about him, and he wasn't told anything about me. He was just said, like, as soon as his HLA typing went into the computer system, a nurse called him at home that night and said, there's a Canadian woman, you're a perfect match, and he jumped 10 feet in the sky. So for the donor, it's actually, they sit in a lazy boy chair, and an IV needle goes into one arm. Blood is withdrawn. It goes into a centrifuge. In the centrifuge, the stem cells are pulled from the blood, and then all the other blood products are returned to the donor in the other arm. And it takes, anywhere from 6 to 9 hours to even 2 days. If the donor is a small person and the patient is a big person, it takes 2 days, and 1 day if it's the reverse. So with we're never told who the donor is, and part of that is because the death rate is so high. Sure. Yeah. But I began to write to my donor right away. Like, I'm writing letters into the ether, and my first letter,
sure.
My first letter was, it's been 100 days, which is the first hurdle. I'm still alive. And the second letter was, it's been a year. Thank you so much for your stem cells. And then the third letter said, my greatest wish would be to meet you in person. And 27 months after my stem cell transplant, William Ashby Hall contacted me from England.
Yeah, it is unbelievable. And there's such a story with William as well. We're talking with Susan Doherty here on Life on Rehearse with Matt Delvecchio and Corrie Sirota. And Susan was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disease called HLH, extremely high death rate of 70%, and affecting, the odds are so slim, 1 in a million adults. And Susan, I can't imagine what you're going through. But William, your match, your donor, you actually had a face-to-face encounter with him, and we're going to talk about that. And what we also want to talk about, which I found so intriguing, William, as it turned out, happened to be a gay man. And when your stem cell implant happened I believe in 2016, if William was in Canada at that time, he would not have qualified, because we had it all backwards here in Canada. Amazing. Yeah. I'm even saying that. So when we come back, Susan, we have to head out to traffic, but when we come back, we're going to hear about that encounter with William. But first, let's head to the CJD Traffic Center with a traffic update.
Life Unrehearsed, brought to you by Flora Lee Senior Residences. Always there for you. Safe, reassuring, and comforting. We call it home.
Welcome back to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Corrie Sirota with my co-host Matt Delvecchio, and we are talking to Susan Doherty and listening to a harrowing story of undergoing a stem cell implant and how she actually survived a deadly illness. So I'm sitting here, Susan, waiting with bated breath to hear about that actual face-to-face meeting you had with your donor.
So it was in January of 2019, and my husband and I flew over to London, and my children all joined us, coming from Boston and New York. And we were staying at the Grosvenor House Hotel, and I had walked into the bar and this little lounge area, and I spoke to the hostess, and I asked her if I could book a table for 8 people at 5 o'clock in the afternoon for champagne. And Elise and Reed, my 2 children, were with me, and she said, well, is this a family reunion? And I said, yes, but I said, it's probably unlike any family reunion I've ever heard of. And I said, I'm meeting my British stem cell donor who saved my life. And she immediately went up to the general manager's office, and she Googled my name, and she read a story that was on CBC with Carol Off that said, unlikely British donor saves Montrealer's life, 1 in 25 million chances. So when we were all seated around the table, the chef arrived with a cake, a blazing cake that was inscribed, "You are 1 in 25 million." I know, it was a really incredibly special moment. And, needless to say, we have stayed in touch ever since. That was a transcendent moment in my life.
Unbelievable. Now, that's January 2019. So now we're going to go back to when you actually had the implant. You got your donor, you got your match. So what is the process now? And first of all, I can't imagine what you're going through, and you have hope. And what happens now?
Well, just last week, I was 5 years, which is kind of a magic number. If you get that far, you've just such a high chance of living out a normal life. So that was a real milestone for me. But you mean like what happens during the transplant?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you basically, it's like an infusion of chemotherapy. You lie in bed. Well, the chemotherapy to remove your own immune system is really terrible, and the side effects are awful, and I won't list them and scare people. But obviously, your germs are your enemy. I had the stem cell transplant at the MUHC. It's a state-of-the-art air filtration system setup of rooms, and I was 50 days in isolation, undergoing the chemotherapy to remove my immune system. Then I had the infusion of William's donor cells, and then you wait to see if your body accepts William's new donor cells, because graft versus host disease is a complication that takes down a lot of people. The reason people don't survive the stem cell transplant is because Williams donor cells attack my own immune cells. Even though my bone marrow has been removed, I still have my own cells in my organs. So graft versus host disease is the biggest complication. But the actual infusion of the stem cells, Corrie, you played I Will Survive. I asked all my friends and family to send me their favorite song. And I had headphones on during the stem cell transplant. And I listened to beautiful music submitted to me by my friends and family, and that was one of the songs. So,
thank you for recognizing that we match the songs with the stories. But clearly, it resonated with you. That we're talking to Susan Doherty, who this is Corrie and Matt on Life Unrehearsed. She had a unbelievable story about undergoing stem cell implant and how she survived a deadly illness. So you mentioned about the support that you just asked or you sought out with some of your friends and family. I'm curious about how was their reaction? What was their reaction to all of this?
I guess I would have to say that I was so convinced that I would make it through, that I would survive, that I managed to convince everybody else. My daughter's a doctor, and she knew the hurdles that I faced, but she never told my husband, which was quite incredible. But, how I approached it was I put my arms around it and said, this is my Himalaya moment. Who gets to climb the Himalayas, right? I looked at it that way. The people I'd meet, the experience I would have, the hill to climb, the steeper the climb, the better the view. I just went into it saying, okay, I'm going to do this. And that really gave me the keys to the kingdom, is my own decision that I was in the survival pile even before I had the transplant.
Oh, it's wonderful to hear. And Susan, you are an inspiration. And first of all, congratulations, hitting close to 5 years now.
Oh, thank you.
It must weigh on you all the time, but every day, every month, every year, it must ease that burden a little bit. And you've been put through the ringer and you've beaten the odds. And I'm sure you've had to sit back and look at life in general. And we're just wrapping up quickly, but what can you share? And I love that you're sharing the story with our listeners. What can you share, what you've learned about life?
I guess I would say, with a stem cell transplant, with any type of hardship, the physical pain is nothing compared to the existential pain. It's the fear of the unknown. Can I run a marathon without any practice? Those are the things that were inherent difficulties for me. And so I guess I would say, don't wish away your life. If something like this creeps up or crops up, put your arms around it and not enjoy it, but make it, don't say, oh, this is going to happen in a month, this is going to happen in a year. Put your arms around it, embrace it, and accept. Acceptance is the key to getting through it.
Yeah. So Susan, thank you so much for your words of it, but your inspirational words of wisdom and sharing your story. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. That's Susan Doherty. She's sharing her story of undergoing a stem cell implant and how she survived a deadly illness. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. Have a great afternoon.
You too, as well. Susan Doherty. All right, Corrie, we're heading out to news soon. What do we have coming up on the second half of the show?
Coming up on Life Unrehearsed, Kids Reading to Kids. It's a program called We Read to You. Wait till you hear about this heartwarming initiative. That's coming up after the 3:30 CTV News Update.